Minnie, and I have sweater paws today. So this week's video is going to be DID terms or lingo, so you understand what people that have DID or OSDD are talking about. Our first term is system. System refers to the collective, so all of the alters in the person's body. Most people will name their systems different things, so for example, we are the Mori system. Our next term is alters, parts, or headmates. This refers to the alternate states of consciousness, so the other people that will take control of the body, the other people that live inside of the body or the brain, people who inhabit the system. So I'm an alter, Garnet's an alter, Kana's an alter, Delilah's an alter, Mina's an alter, Hornet's an alter, Violet, Misery, everyone's an alter. They're all their own people and they will have their own gender, look, religion, beliefs, sexual orientation, and much more. Our next term is switch, which means that you are changing personalities or someone else is taking control. So if we had a switch right now, we would have, say, Minnie, and then we'd switch and Kana would be out. Speaking of out, our next term is front or out. They mean the same thing, they're just kind of interchangeable. But this refers to when someone is in control of the body, they are out or they are fronting. Our next term is multiplicity or being multiple. This just means that you have alters or you are more than one person. So basically people with DID or OSDD. Singlet or singleton. These are terms that systems use to refer to people who don't have DID or OSDD or have a single personality or only one person inhabiting their body. This is not a derogatory term. I don't know why anybody would think it was, but just in case, there's a disclaimer, it's not derogatory. Inner world or headspace. That's basically a world in someone's head. This is a place where alters will go when they are not out in the body or when they're inside. This is a place where the mind can process trauma or things that are going on. Everybody's inner worlds are going to be different. Usually they're not going to be the same as another system because DID is a very personalized disorder. So just because you know about one person's inner world doesn't mean you know about the other person's inner world too. Some inner worlds can be as small as just like one room, like this bedroom that I'm in, or it can be as big as like a universe. The size of your inner world is going to depend on the amount of alters in your system or what is needed. Our next term is NPCs. This is a term taken from the gaming community, which basically stands for non-playable characters. I'm sure you can kind of see where this is going, but in case you can't, NPCs are people, animals, mythical creatures, or, you know, insects, whatever, that just kind of exist to take up space in your inner world. They're not alters, they just exist to take up space, so they're NPCs. See how that makes sense? Our next term is split. This is when the brain creates a new alter due to periods of high stress or a new trauma. And yes, alters can split off later in life, although the disorders of DID and OSDD have to be formed before the age of 7 to 9. Our next term is trauma. Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing event that the brain has difficulty processing. People without DID or OSDD can have trauma too, of course. In DID or OSDD, a trauma will often cause a new alter to split. Our next term is trigger. This is something that will cause a panic attack or anxiety attack, dissociation, a flashback, a switch, and so on. It can be sounds, tastes, smells, objects, foods, pretty much anything that reminds you of the situation that was traumatic. Not all triggers will seem to make sense to you, but you have to respect them nonetheless, even if they seem very silly, because they're not silly to the person who is experiencing the trigger, trust me. In DID and OSDD, there are two types of triggers that mean something different than the trigger that I just explained. So I'm going to tell you about those right now. They're called positive triggers and negative triggers. So a positive trigger is something positive or good that will trigger a certain alter to come forward or front. This can be things like a song, a favorite food, a toy store for littles, a movie, or pretty much anything, honestly. A certain person, lots of different things. A negative trigger is the opposite of a positive trigger, so it's something negative or bad that will trigger or encourage an alter to come forward or switch. An example of this from our system would be Delilah being triggered out by yelling. It's very negative for her because she comes out and she's distressed and ready to fight someone. So negative triggers aren't fun. at all. Our next term is amnesia. In DID, amnesia happens when alter A is in the body and then alter B switches and remembers little to nothing about the time that alter A was out. Our next term is flashback. A flashback is an involuntary recurrent memory where an individual has a sudden and powerful re-experience of a past event or trauma. Our next term is structural dissociation. The theory of structural dissociation is the most accepted theory on how DID and OSDD are formed in childhood. It is backed by science and lots of medical studies. The theory of structural dissociation basically states that everybody starts out with different states of self when they're babies because you don't know who you are yet and you're not old enough or developed enough to know who you are. So you have, I'm hungry, cry, I want to play, I want my mom, I want, all these different parts, and they're separate. But once you grow to the age of 7 to 9, all of those parts will come together and integrate to make one singular personality. So anybody who doesn't have DID or OSDD, you formed normally. If you have trauma before the age of 7 to 9, then those different personality states will further separate and become their own people. Instead of becoming one person, they'll become lots of different people, and that's the theory. Our next term is polyfragmented. This is a term used to classify systems with over 100 alters. Our next term is subsystem. This is when an alter in a system also has a system. So it's like systemception. Our next term is blurry, fuzzy, or blended. These are all terms that can be used interchangeably. This is typically used for when a system is unsure or doesn't know at all who's out. Our next term is body memories, which basically are memories that happen to your body. They often come from trauma or important moments in your life. They can happen with or without a flashback and can take the form of pain, itching, smells, tastes, or sounds that aren't really there. Our next term is pseudomemories. A pseudomemory is a memory that an alter may have from before they became an alter in the system, even though it never happened to the body. So this is especially common in fictives or factives, which I will talk about later in the video. If you're confused, it's coming. But they will often have memories of their source from before they were part of the system, and that's called a pseudo-memory because it's not a real memory, but they have it and it feels very real to them. It's kind of like a past life almost, although it wasn't a past life because it's not possible, but it's kind of like that. Our next term is pseudotrauma. This is trauma an alter may have from before they were an alter in the system, so it's a type of pseudo-memory. Our next term is passive influence. This is when an alter who is not out affects the behavior, feelings, and or thoughts of the alter who is out or fronting. The alter doesn't have to be co-conscious to have a passive influence, but usually they will be co-conscious if they have a passive influence. Passive influence can affect many things, such as any of your senses, triggers, likes and dislikes, movement or posture, opinions, boundaries, romantic or sexual orientation, speech patterns, or introvert-extrovert ratio, and many more things. Our first term in the situations category is co-front. This is when two or more alters are in control of the body at the same time. So I'm going to use the car analogy. So let's use me and let's use Wendy. So we're both co-fronting together. We have a wheel in between both of us. So either one of us can kind of like reach over and drive whenever we want because it's in between us. We can both take it whenever we want. That's the most common one for us at least. So that one works pretty well. But there's also been times where, both of us will have a steering wheel. And of course, this is just an analogy. We don't actually have steering wheels inside. This is just an analogy, just so you can picture it. So we both have our own steering wheels and we can drive. And it's kind of difficult because if I want to go this way and Wendy wants to go this way, it's a mess. So that one doesn't happen very often to us, but usually it doesn't work very well when it does happen. So I'm very thankful that it doesn't happen often because I don't like when it happens. Our next term is co-conscious. This is when another alter hovers or is close by, so, hanging out. They can see and hear what is going on in the outer world, but usually they won't have any control over what happens out here. They'll just be able to see. So I'm going to use the car analogy again. If I'm driving, I'm in control of the body I'm driving. There can be someone in the passenger seat with me, so let's use Wendy's in the passenger seat. So she can see and she can hear and she can tell me what she wants to do. Say, turn left, turn right, let's do this, and then I can do that if I want because she's in the passenger seat. If Nina is in the back seat, she can see pretty well what's going on, but she can't interact as well with me because she's back there, I'm up here. But she can still interact, obviously, it's just a little more difficult. If you are in the trunk of the car, so let's say the trunk of the SUV first, so you can still talk, but I probably can't hear you very well at all. You can't see as much of what's going on because you're back there, and if you're in the trunk of a car, like the one that is completely separated, if you know what I'm talking about, I really hope you do. So if you're in that trunk, then you can't see what's going on at all. You can't interact with us. You don't know where we are, what's going on. And those are just the different levels of being co-conscious. Our next term is dissociating. This is something that everyone in the world experiences to some degree. So if you're driving home and you are just all of a sudden home and you realize you have no memory of driving home, or you're reading a book and you realize you have absolutely no memory of what you've read over the page, that's dissociation. That is normal dissociation, so you don't have to be worried if that happens to you. That's normal. It's almost like zoning out, but not quite. It can become abnormal when it happens too often and becomes severe. Dissociation can be when time seems to slow down, feeling out of your body, not recognizing yourself in the mirror, and much more. It can also be a response to a trauma or a traumatic situation, as a way for your brain to try to make the rest of you survive the situation and stay relatively sane. Our next term is dormancy, or being dormant or going dormant. There's a lot of different ways to say that. This is when an alter goes to sleep almost. They become completely inactive for a while. This can last for weeks, months, or even years. Our next term is surfacing and resurfacing. When an alter appears for the first time, that's called surfacing, and when they reappear after being gone or dormant for a while, that's called resurfacing. This is different than splitting, just so we're aware. Our next term is rapid switching. This is when a system switches multiple times in quick succession. It is very difficult to stop for the most part. Our next term is integrating alters. This is the process of removing amnesic barriers between the alters to improve system communication. This is not the same as fusion integration, which is our next term, fusion integration. This is when you combine alters to make one. So alter A and alter B can integrate to become alter C, or alter A can integrate into alter B, and alter B will take some of the traits from alter A but still stay pretty similar to alter B. Alters are either an ANP, which stands for apparently normal part, or an EP, which stands for an emotional part. Our first type of alter is a host. This is the alter that is out the most often. They often don't know anything about the traumas. Our next type of alter is a trauma holder. This is an alter who is aware of the trauma or traumas and holds it to keep it away from the rest of the system. Our next type of alter is a protector. This is an alter who protects the body and the alters who reside inside of it. There are different subtypes of protectors, such as primary, physical, emotional, avenger, persecutor protectors, and probably more that I can't think of right now. Our next term is a gatekeeper. This is an alter who keeps track of and can control who's fronting, and they will also usually have a lot of power over the inner world and the alters that live inside of it. Our next type of alter is a persecutor. This is an alter who will harm the body and the alters who live inside of it, or just scare the alters. They will not harm anybody that's not part of the system. They are usually the ones that people think are going to be harmful, or the ones who are going to people, even though that does not happen at all ever. We are more likely to be victims of crime than to be the ones doing the crime. Just gonna throw that out there. They're often traumatized and misunderstood, so they deserve love too, even if you don't think they do. They do. Our next type of alter is a soother or a caretaker. This is an alter who will calm the other alters down. They will often, but not always, take a parental role in the system or be parental figures for a lot of the system. Our next type of alter is an age slider. This is an alter whose age will slide up and down, usually between a certain set age, so let's say 6 to 15. They will slide in between those two ages. Our next type of alter is a little. This is a child alter. So I've usually seen, we have no child alters, so I'm not really sure, but I've usually seen that these are alters who are under the age of 6 to 7. And our next type of alter is a middle. We also don't have any of these, but we have seen on Instagram and in the DID community that usually middles are between the ages of 8 to 12 or 13. Our next type of alter is fragment. These are alters who have only one job or just hold one emotion or memory. They're often very two-dimensional, unlike other alters in the system. Our next type of alter is a non-human. This is an alter that is not human. They can be objects, animals, or fantasy creatures such as fairies, unicorns, demons like Delilah in our system, angels like Wendy in our system, and much more. Our next type of alter is an introject. This is an alter who is based on someone from the external world. So out here, there are two subtypes of introjects called fictives and factives. So a fictive is an alter who is based on someone that is fictional, so from a TV show or a book or a video game or a movie or anything like that. And a factive is an alter who is based off of a real person, so a friend, a family member, an abuser, a celebrity, anything like that. So that is the end of our terms video. If we missed any terms, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and maybe if there's enough, we'll make a part 2. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, press the bell notification, do everything else that I'm supposed to tell you to do when I'm ending a video, and we will see you next week.